Okay, there we go. Welcome, everyone. We'll get underway now. This is our creative competition tonight. And before we start, just a few announcements. Upcoming meetings. March 10th, next Friday, will be our last B competition, and it'll be a projection competition. March 17th, photojournalism. And then March 24th, we have a live lecture in the club. Paul Lender, and I've seen some of his work. You can go to his website as well. And he's going to take us all through the tintype photography, like the 1860s and whatnot. That's actually him with a selfie tintype. I don't think that was with a 8x10 view camera. Hard to do a selfie, but in some way, it should be a very interesting lecture. That's March 24th. Our next SIG meeting is going to be April 6th with Dave Bush, and he's going to be talking on astrophotography, how to photograph the moon, not just the star trails or the Milky Way, but just simple shots of the moon, the stars, the conjunctions, special apps to use, camera settings, and then, of course, afterwards we'll break into camera-specific groups. So that's the first Thursday of April, April 6th. And our annual meeting is coming up April 21st. We had not had it for, I think, a year or two due to COVID, but now we're starting back up again. We did it virtually before. This is for our election of officers and board members. And we really encourage everyone to attend. The membership, officers will be there. It's a good time to direct questions and suggestions. We'll be updating the membership on just the status of the club, the direction of the club. It's just a good night all around, and that'll be our voting, and that's April 21st. End of the year competition is coming up. Start choosing your images. More information to follow when I made that slide up this afternoon, and it's here. And the latest information, the opening is going to be March 10th for prints and digital, and we'll have more information on that. And the last day of eligibility for contests will be images that were up to May 19th, help me out, the last is the photojournal. March 31st is the deadline for submission, be it digitally or with prints. Yes, and Bill Keaton here, give us a bit more information.
The drop boxes for prints that you want to enter will be assembled and ready the evening of the 10th. That's next week. Images from that evening will be available that night for choosing for the end of the year if you were in the B category. On March 17th, our last photojournalism, the images that you put in that night will be eligible that night or shortly thereafter to enter in photojournalism into the year. And everything closes, the drop boxes in the back, shutter score, everything ends March 31st. I want to stress, this is the first time in a couple of years that we've had both print and digital submission competitions. That means you can enter images in both of those, but it's limited to 3 photographs. If you enter 2 digital submission photographs in Nature on shutter score, it means you can only enter 1 Nature print in the drop boxes in the back. I'm letting you know if you enter more than the 3, we will be calling the prints and disqualifying them. It's just the easiest for us as a committee to do under the time constraints that we have. So please limit your entries to 3 per category. Good luck to all.
And this information I am going to send out to the membership in an email, and it will be posted on our website homepage too. So you'll be able to refer to that. And of course, all of our meetings, our public meetings, are live on our YouTube channel, and you could reference them anytime. Just go to our website and click on the YouTube icon. When you get to the YouTube page, click on Live. It's kind of counterintuitive, but Live is where we have all of our recordings in date order. So, let me now get the competition underway, and we'll bring up a little bit about our judges. Bear with me here. Okay. Our judges tonight, Carl Bechtold. Carl is a former reporter, photographer, editor, and publisher of several Wyoming papers, including those based in Green River and Cody. He has won several state and national awards for photojournalism. Now a Utah resident, he still maintains membership in the Wyoming Through the Lens Facebook group. Francis Wilson is our second judge. Francis Wilson hails from Huddersfield, West Yorkshire, England. He first started taking photography seriously in March 2020 and was quickly told that he had a natural eye for a composition. He discovered he had a strong passion for editing images and could draw on years of art and design experience. Fast forward to today, and he finds himself running his own successful photography company, Fran Wilson Photography, through which he has sold prints to all four corners of the world, while also taking on many commission pieces and projects. Wilson's images are continually awarded on 1x.com, and he has also won first place in several photography competitions. And a quote from him, he says, quote, "I continue to be astounded at the success I have received in such a short space of time. It is truly humbling. I know I still have a lot to learn about photography, plus where this journey could take me. My deepest wish would be to photograph the world because I know that I would be able to apply my own unique impression of how I see the world." Unquote. And our third judge is Ryn Clark. Ryn is a photographer, visual artist, and educator from Cleveland who embraces her iPhone and digital SLR cameras. Ryn experiments with different photographic techniques in her image making, including elaborate nature compositing, photopolymer gravure, encaustic and hand-colored photographic prints. She also holds workshops in iPhone photography and photographic compositing around the country. She is on the board of the Artists Archives of the Western Reserve in Cleveland, Ohio, past president of the Cleveland Museum of Art's affiliate group, Friends of Photography, and past Zone X photography representative for the Garden Club of America. She holds a fine art degree from Marymount University. Her artwork has been exhibited nationally and internationally and is held by private, corporate, and medical collections throughout the United States. She is represented by the Bonfoy Gallery in Cleveland, Ohio, ADC Fine Art in Cincinnati, Ohio, and Wilder Nightingale Fine Art in Taos, New Mexico. So those are our judges tonight, and let's get on now to our creative competition.
Carl says, "This is a beautiful fish tank creation, speaking of both the tank's artistry and the photo. The diver proved a bit of a surprise. At first glance, I thought it was photoshopped into the scene, but then the plasticity of the figure becomes juxtaposed to the fish and floor or corner. The sparkles and bubbles in the upper left are a bit distracting, and I was wishing they might be blurred a bit more."
Among the monsters, Bill Keaton, 19 points.
Francis says, The framing and spacing is excellent, plus the glass stems are nice and vertical. I also really like the way the water refracts the light as it breaks the repeating pattern nicely. The color scheme seems a little off, though, with far too many conflicting colors. I suggest that you try this again, but with maybe 2 or 3 complementing colors. Finally, I would suggest that you create a background mask with a view to reducing the saturation, clarity, vibrance, etc., in the hope that you create a bit of visual separation.
Bent Stripes by Ron Werman, 18 points.
Rin says, a very beautiful use of vibrant color palette in the butterflies with the background replicating those same colors, but in a very muted tone. Creating shadows under the butterflies would give it more depth.
Butterfly of Butterflies by Vicky Wirt, 20 points.
This work is gorgeous in its lighting, colors, composition, and movement, Carl says. It is beautiful art, even though I'm not sure what it is. I thought at first it might feature a fish's nose, but I'm not sure I've ever seen a fish spit like that. My next notion is that a pebble or other object hit glassy water and the scene erupted. The coloring and blurry focus are gorgeous.
Clematis Seed Reflection by Dan Rowland, 23 points, third place.
Francis says, this tree is a strong subject choice, but is a little tightly framed. When I compose single subjects like this, portraiture as well, I will often treat it like a Word document, where you give equal spacing on all sides of the subject. The color, grading, textures, clarity, and sharpness is quite a bit off too, which is giving the effect of the tree being stuck on the image. I understand that you've tried to create a bit of separation, but at the same time, it must also look realistic.
Desert Tree with Texture, Paul Giglia, 19 points.
Rin says, how did she do that? Excellent job of foreshortening the arms. The light on his face draws you into the scene and grabs you with so many questions. The added texture is a little bit distracting.
Drink by Joanne Damian, 21 points.
Carl says, these hands hold layers of Gothic in this fascinating interpretation. Given the strength of the face, I'm wondering what the hands are doing or what they might represent. I know I'm old-fashioned, but the specs make me think we should have cleaned the negative. It is thought-provoking.
Eyes by Joanne Damian, 25 points, first place.
Francis says, I really like this image. The creativity is awesome. The message is plain and clear. You're a butterfly who's been cooped up for far too long, and you're now ready to spread your wings. I can't fault the framing and composition, plus the color grading is excellent too. The subject has excellent sharpness and clarity, but unfortunately, it doesn't match the background. Otherwise, I would have given this image a perfect score. Is this a self-portrait? I'm not really sure, but if it is, I'm even more impressed, as the focus on the eyes is spot on. However, I would suggest that you tone down the saturation and clarity of the largest teardrop, as it seems a little out of balance with the other eye.
Metamorphosis by Jackie Sayuski, 25 points, first place.
Rin says the image is beautifully composed following the rule of thirds. Overprocessing the image creates a jarring effect. Trying a more subtle approach might be more successful.
Niagara Falls Rainbow Painting by Joe DiStefano, 21 points.
Carl says, what a beautiful capture of northern lights. The lower lights are interesting but a bit distracting, especially in the lower left area and what looks like something on the back of the cabin. That said, the cabin with its silhouette, the clouds, the lights in the sky are intriguing and beautiful. I'm wondering if it were shot from a lower position further to the right might have helped, along with touching out some of the lights.
Northern Lights, Alta, Norway by Eric Wethington, 20 points.
Francis says, this image caught my attention straight away, which is never a bad thing, mainly because of its symmetry. However, as I keep looking at it, I wish it was a little simpler to look at. My eyes keep bouncing from left to right, top to bottom. I would suggest that you try darkening the edges somewhat in an attempt to keep the eyes from moving too much. Maybe flirt with the idea of a high contrast black and white too.
Park Square by Vicky Wirt, 21 points.
Rin says a beautiful image with gorgeous light, form, and movement. Cropping out some of the black background might enhance the total effect.
Phantom Dancer by Susan Bestel, 22 points, honorable mention.
This is an interesting game of colors with green on green and pink on pink. It is a striking mix of colors and beautifully simple. I wish it were a bit more dynamic. I see a bit of line drawing the eye from the top left to the lower line, but my eye isn't drawn very powerfully to anything.
Pink and Green Still Life by Beth Babbitts, 19 points.
Francis says, I love the color choice here because purple and orange go together very well. Unfortunately, though, this image is a bit of a fail for me because the camera lens is so close to the subjects. I'm having a little trouble with guessing what the subjects are. Is one a salt lamp? Also, my guess is, because you're so close, you chose to use a narrow aperture, which seems to be causing quite a lot of diffraction. Try shooting at f/16 or wider, or you could possibly try focus stacking too.
Pink by Beth Babbitts, 18 points.
Rin says, with the use of a cloud-like texture, this beautiful ethereal image transports you into a dreamlike state. Love the different blue tones. What would happen if she had her eyes slightly opened and staring at the viewer? Would it draw you in even more? Just a thought.
Rhapsody in Blue by Marge Brady, 21 points.
Carl says, I'm reminded of the rhyme of the ancient mariner with the ship floating above time and space. The movement and direction are captivating. The misty colors make this work both moving and magical. I'm a bit lost trying to get a sense of what is floating this boat. I guess I'm saying the area just below the boat has no anchor, but then it is a spectacular ethereal image.
Sailing in the Clouds by Paul Giglia, 20 points.
Francis says, I love the idea of this, plus the jellyfish are nice and sharp. Unfortunately, though, the composition seems a little off. I'm not particularly keen on having the tentacles go out of the frame. I would also try to take more care with the masking because I can visibly see where you have cut around the subjects.
School of Jellyfish by Joe DiStefano, 21 points.
Rin says, nice use of intentional camera movement. The beautiful gray tones complement the brassy metals and wood. A more prominent focal point would help the eye rest into the image.
Spinning Organ Pipes by Nancy Kekalik, 19 points.
Carl says this is a beautiful way to display a bit of sculpture, even if I can't understand what that piece is saying. The silhouetting is dynamic. The reflection is eye-catching. I do wish her head was not missing down there.
Spilt Milk by Gary Marich, 19 points.
Francis says, this is a visually interesting image, and I feel it could make a great piece of wall art. There is just one thing which is sticking out to me, though, because you seem to have shot this wall at a slight angle. If you have a chance to take this again, try to make sure that you are perpendicular to the wall, as it will make for a much more visually pleasing piece. If this is not possible, you could try adjusting the image with the Transform panel in Lightroom, or whichever software equivalent tool that may be.
Textured Flowers by Ron Werman, 19 points.
Rin says, a different perspective here creates a visually dynamic image with much movement. I would love to see more detail in the dark blacks.
The Rainforest by Bill Keaton, 17 points.
Carl says this is a dynamic use of reflective silhouetting. The outer trees work like parentheses to bring the image together, and the center offers a powerful path for the eye to follow from the bottom. From there, I get a bit tangled up in the twigs where they meet the center. It does take a bit of 3D defocusing to bring the image together for me. It didn't really grab me, but it certainly did drag me in.
Tree Dance by Mike Murray, 21 points.
Francis says, I like the detail in this, but I yearn to see a little more sharpness in the hands. After all, they are the true instruments. Next time, I would suggest that you raise the f-stop a touch, just so you can get all the nails in focus. I do like a symmetrical image, but it has to be perfectly done. Otherwise, the mistakes will stand out clearly. I would suggest that you spend a little longer trying to get the images perfectly aligned. Overall, though, I like it.
Trumpet, Yin and Yang by Gary Marich, 21 points.
Rin says, such a lovely, creatively composed image. The innovative use of this particular texture brings out the ruggedness of the individual and the possibility of his story. The eyes are piercing right through the viewer's soul. Well done.
Veteran by Jackie Sayuski, 25 points, first place.
Wow, this is complex architecture and lighting, Carl says. The color and pull of the image are compelling. I do wish they would draw my gaze to something. The vignetting and soft focus areas might have been improved by a smaller aperture.
Which Way Do I Go by Fran Marino, 24 points, second place.
Francis says, the composition is quite nice, with the largest mushroom being placed over the golden ratio. I also like the fact that you got down low to the subject, which has the effect of welcoming me in. Personally, though, I'm not a fan of the oil painting effect. I feel that it takes away from the textures that I would like to see in the mushrooms. Also, because the effect is so strong, I find myself looking at the pattern in the background rather than the subject itself. Maybe try toning it down a bit?
Woodland Bouquet by Mary Kay Tallarico, 23 points, third place.
Ren says, a great use of color in this visual stimulating image. I need a resting place for my eyes to land on.
Acid Rock Hall by Dan Rowland, 22 points, honorable mention.
Wow, Carl says. It looks like an acrylic painting. Beautiful flow. Flowers do sort of whatever they want, and this one is a bit complex in the left corner, so the image feels a bit out of balance. That said, the detail on the left and the lighting flowing to the right are beautifully magnetic.
Acrylic Dahlia by Fran Zanizer, 20 points.
Francis says, is this shot through a prism of some sort? If so, then I love the basic idea. But for me, this image suffers greatly from a poor subject choice. Maybe try a singular subject instead, because the message is getting a little lost in translation. The composition is a little right side heavy, which is a problem, because I'm guessing that the main subject is the lone giraffe in the middle. Finally, I would suggest that you try to find something with colors which complement each other, because these seem to clash a little.
Giraffe in Color by Fran Marino, 22 points, honorable mention.
Rin says, love the composition created by the lone tree piercing the middle of the canyon opening. Maybe cropping the left and right shadows would make the focal point stand out.
Jagged by Mike Murray, 21 points.
The lighting of the light is gorgeous, Carl says. The angle is a powerful draw. The bulb base does feel a bit incongruous in its perhaps corroded condition. I'm thinking maybe it is a nice missile launching from its old planet into a universe of new light.
Luminescent by Mary Kay Tallarico, 21 points.
Francis says, this seems like quite an expansive image, which is ironic, really, because the prison cells are far from it. The symmetry seems to be on point, which I feel is important with an image like this. Overall, though, the subject doesn't seem strong enough, and I feel this image would be improved greatly with the inclusion of a person in the scene.
Mansfield Reformatory Fisheye by Nancy Kekalik, 22 points, honorable mention.
Rin says this layered image works as a great example of a foreground, middle ground, and background composition. The graphic process used here is successful as an almost silkscreen effect.
Roy's Route 66, Amboy, California by Melanie Plummer, 20 points.
Carl says the dynamic flow and vignetting in this image are as dynamic as the love the photo displays. The texture feels like a classic masterpiece on canvas. The moment, the lighting, and framing are stunning. I don't think I'll ever need to go to another ballet.
She Stole My Heart by Susan Bestel, 24 points, second place. And that concludes our creative pictures. We'll go on now to pictorial.
Francis says, I do like a bit of decay and rust, as it can make for something quite visually appealing. What spoils this image for me, though, is the time of day it was shot. The light appears to be quite harsh, plus it is hitting from directly behind. So just like with portraiture, this is having the effect of making the subject appear a little flat. Maybe try coming back at a different time of day when the sun is nearly hitting from side on, as this will show up details better. My final suggestion would be to use a wider aperture so that you blur the trees from the background. This would encourage the viewer to look at the subject.
56 Mercury by Dennis Wirt, 23 points, honorable mention.
Rin says the use of the secondary colors of orange and purple are very successful in this image. With multiple images overlaid, the tension created is palpable while allowing my eye to rest on the center focal point.
Adrian Raquel, African Beauty by Fran Marino, 21 points.
Yes, those are powerful eyes, Carl says. The scene offers a bit of the macabre, and the color and sharpness are dead on. That said, I can't really tell what's going on or what the characters are seeing or what they're doing. It's a juxtaposition of a disjointed moment on stage while those eyes have me by the throat.
Big Sister is Watching by Melanie Plummer, 24 points, third place.
Francis says, this house makes for quite a strong subject. Plus, you got the verticals pleasingly straight. Unfortunately, though, this image isn't captured in the best light. To combat this, you could try to do some heavy dodging and burning with the idea of drawing the viewer's eyes towards the house. My suggestion is that you get rid of the flagpole and the TV dish too, because they don't add anything to the story that you're trying to tell.
Cottage on the Lake by Eric Wethington, 20 points.
Rin says the dunes in Death Valley are a photographer's delight, as shown here with this beautiful undulating photograph of shapes and shadows. Maybe cropping at the top would stop my eye from leaving the image.
Death Valley Dunes by Dennis Wirt, 24 points, third place.
Carl says this feels like a gorgeous mother and baby moment. The bud and the blossom. The focus on petals and details fade beautifully into a gorgeous background. Though this is close, it is hard to get everything one hopes for in floral photos. In this one, the stem of the bud drops through a somewhat busy clutter.
Dreamy Dahlia by Fran Zanizer, 21 points.
Francis says, I do love a good autumn fall image. Plus, you got the color reflections in the water, too. I feel that compositionally speaking, though, the trees alone aren't a strong enough subject to carry the image alone. Maybe if there was a boathouse or even a boat there, this would improve the image greatly. It seems a little unbalanced, too, but that's mainly because the sky is really bright, which is causing my eyes to drift to the left. To combat this, you could create a subtle vignette around the trees, just so that it pulls the eyes towards them.
Fall Reflection at the River's End by Fran Zanizer, 18 points.
Rin says a great capture of an iconic scene using such vibrant colors. I love the textures in the blue-white contrasting with the stone in the background building. My eye needs a focal point to rest on.
Freedom Tower seen through the Port of Miami globe by Susan Mahorsic, 17 points.
Carl says, now that's a nicely lit dog. The background works well and the image is well balanced and sharp. A bit more catchlight in the eyes might be helpful. This pup portrait might not have scored quite so high if the judge had noticed earlier that the pooch is licking its nose.
Ginger by Joseph Miko, 21 points.
Francis says, compositionally speaking, this is great. Unfortunately, though, this image suffers from a common mistake that most beginner landscape photographers make. This was shot at completely the wrong time of day. I'm guessing that this is a shot which isn't quite so easily replicated, though, as you may have been taking this whilst on vacation. Instead, you could try toning the blues down whilst also upping the saturation of the yellows and oranges. This should make the foreground elements pop more. Maybe try selectively upping the clarity, texture, and sharpness of the foreground just a little as well.
Grand Canyon South Rim by Melanie Plummer, 20 points.
Rin says, a beautifully composed image with gorgeous colors. I love how my eye can move throughout the composition while still being able to move out and then come back into the scene. Good job.
Leaf by Rick Mills, 20 points.
Carl says this is a nicely balanced and inviting scene. It does draw the eye into the building and the clouds are well defined. It is a fairly common interpretation of a waterfront.
Malign Lake, Jasper, NP by David Korosek, 23 points, honorable mention.
Francis says, this is an epic composition, so props for that. This image really does have a lot of potential, but yet again, the lighting is all wrong. Try coming back to this during the golden hours instead. If this isn't possible, try shifting the white balance over to yellow, as there does seem to be a strange bluish-green tinge to this whole image. Maybe think about a bit of dodging and burning too, as you could really make this watermill pop.
Mill from Bridge by Rick Mills, 22 points.
Rin says, the composition is spectacular, letting my eye wander about and resting on the beautiful reflection. Maybe opening up the shadows would create a little more texture in the trees.
Mount Edith Cavell, Jasper, NP by David Korosek, 23 points, honorable mention.
Carl says this is a remarkably complex subject with a striking presentation of physics in stop action. The photo well records the beautiful display. Perhaps a higher angle might have allowed the image to be cropped more to remove the angular distractions in the background. An experiment in slow motion might have helped explain the device.
Pendulum by Dan Hennessy, 20 points.
Francis says, I love the sky in this image. It really is the star of the show. This is where it ends for me, though, because the rest of the image seems quite unnatural. When doing HDR images, it's important to remember that the shadows should remain as such. Once you go past what the eyes naturally see, the image can easily become quite fake-looking. I would suggest that you drop shadows on the rocks, particularly as I can see quite a bit of noise. Also, when you're pulling back the highlights whilst lifting the shadows, be wary of the halo effect on the edges. You can combat this by making the adjustments locally rather than globally.
Poseidon's Lair by Bob Kowaleski, 20 points.
Ryan says, makes me want to go back to Cannon Beach in Oregon. Gorgeous capture of a sunset and the reflection created by the imposing rock structure. Horizon line is a tad off kilter, otherwise well done.
Rising High by Mike Murray, 21 points.
Carl says the colors, reflections, and balance are beautiful. The perspective has avoided visual tipping of the skyscrapers, so the scene does look balanced. This is a very nice harbor shot, even though there is no motion. It does not have a strong draw to bring the viewer's eye to anything in particular, and the scene is quite static.
Rock and Roll Hall of Fame by David Tripp, 23 points, honorable mention.
Francis says, I love this angle. It shows off the shapes of the sails perfectly. There does appear to be a slight bit of lens distortion, though. I don't often say this, but maybe try upping the saturation of the blue, as this would create a bit of color contrast between the subject and sky. Alternatively, you could try this in a high contrast black and white, but try lowering the textures whilst increasing the sharpness a touch. This might make for a nice fine art image. Well done.
Sails Going Up by Dan Hennessy, 22 points.
Wow, Ryan says, I love this beautiful image. So well done. The only thing I would suggest is cropping a little off the left side.
Snowy Egret by Bob Kowaleski, 25 points, second place.
Carl says this is a very nice companion photo, and the background is beautifully lit. The background is defocused enough to make the subject stand out. It is a well-lit and nicely balanced photo for the family room.
Spring Breeze in Tuscany by Susan Bestel, 20 points.
Francis says, this image has a lovely warm feel to it, plus you got the detail on the tree beautifully. I feel that you have cropped this a little tight though, so it feels a little claustrophobic. Maybe you did this because of the light from the window though, in which case I'd shoot it again but at night, or maybe pull the curtains on. Another thing to try would be to shoot it at f11 or f16, as this would give all the lights a nice starburst effect.
Stan Hyatt Christmas by Nancy Kekalik, 22 points.
Ryan says, beautiful movement, line, and texture with this lily. The gorgeous soft background complements the green and white in the flowers so perfectly. Well done.
Trumpet Lily by Marge Brady, 23 points, honorable mention.
Ethereal, that lighting and season, Carl says. This photo turns what could quite well have been a dreary day into an inviting landscape. The lighting balance is surprisingly well executed. It's a feeling something like, quote, stopping by the woods on a cloudy evening, unquote.
Valley View by Dan Rowland, 25 points, second place.
Francis says, I like the inclusion of the person in this image, as it does lift the entire image. However, he is placed far too centrally for my taste. Perhaps try placing him in line with the rule of thirds instead, as this would help the eyes settle better. Another suggestion would be to raise the whites a touch, as the snow is edging towards being a little gray.
Walking Through the Tunnel by Joseph Miko, 23 points, honorable mention.
Ryan says, a well-composed image of a difficult subject. The lighting is wonderfully soft and subdued, bringing out the texture in the marble. Maybe crop a little off the top would enhance the composition.
What Might Have Been, President Garfield by David Tripp, 21 points.
Carl says blue and magnificent mountains dominate this photo, and the winding road from the corner has an inviting angle. The foreground lighting dulls the image, particularly the building. The photo might have been better if taken in a different moment when, and if, the clouds might have opened and lit the building a bit. Ansel Adams used to wait days, sometimes, for that particular moment.
Alpine Retreat by Dennis Wirt, 24 points, third place.
Francis says, what an adorable image, plus the focus is spot on too. Now I know that most people don't like to adjust wildlife images too much, but if you darkened around the subject somewhat, the viewer wouldn't be able to help but look at it. As it stands, my attention keeps on being drawn to the tree.
An Awake Koala by Vicky Wirt, 24 points, third place.
Ryan says, an interesting take on the use of color and texture. Maybe a close crop of the image would create a more mysterious view of the leaf.
Anatomy of a Leaf by Joe DiStefano, 21 points.
Carl says this is a beautiful structure with pleasant lighting and clarity. Straightening the perspective would possibly help this photo so the structure doesn't appear to be leaning back. If the opportunity was available, changing the angle a bit and capturing the building in more of a rule of thirds position might have helped as well.
Garfield Memorial by David Tripp, 23 points, honorable mention.
Francis says, compositionally speaking, this is great. I do feel that the vibrance is a little too much, though, with the greens being the worst offender. Maybe try dropping the vibrance, saturation of everything, but the red huts. You could really make the subject pop by doing this. Another idea would be to darken the surrounding areas, particularly the sky, as it does keep pulling my eye away.
House by the Fjord by Eric Wethington, 23 points, honorable mention.
Ryan says, I can't tell if this building is popping out or it is an illusion. Either way, it is cleverly handled. A great juxtaposition of traditional and modern construction techniques. The more I look, the more interesting it becomes.
Keith Building Reflection by Ron Werman, 25 points, second place.
Here is a nice portrait of a beautiful model, perhaps better placed in a different category, Carl says. As a portrait, I wish the left side fill light was a little bit stronger and her position was more balanced. Her features are a bit too far to the left. Catch lights in the eyes often help with portraits.
Little Adeline by Joseph Miko, 22 points.
Francis says, this image has a strong composition with carefully places of sunburst. I particularly like the visual contrast of the trees, plus the palm trunk frames the left side nicely. My only suggestion would be to add a luminance mask on the sun, as I feel it would look better with the white balance pushed over to yellow. Nice shot.
Live Oak by Gary Marich, 26 points, first place.
Ryan says, a beautiful pastoral scene which gently allows my eye to wander about. I love the layered composition and the subtleness of the color. Well done.
Mill from the River by Rick Mills, 23 points, honorable mention.
Carl says this is a truly interesting lakeside photo. It almost looks like a boat flower planted along the shoreline. Would a bit tighter cropping on the left have brightened the overall cast of the photo? Cropping the building and perhaps approaching the scene a bit more from the left might improve the shot as well, so long as that doesn't put the photographer up to his neck in the water.
Moraine Lake Canoes by David Korosek, 26 points, first place.
Francis says, this image has a great foreground, background, and main subject. It's nicely sharp from back to front, too. But because of all these reasons, it seems to be a victim of its own success. I feel that you were also conflicted with this, too, hence why you placed the church on the center line. Dare I say it, this image really doesn't need as much foreground, and it may be better served with a 16:9 crop. Also, maybe it's my eyes, but the subject seems slightly wonky. Please don't be disheartened, though, because I'm merely just nitpicking over a great image.
Mountainside Service by Bob Kowaleski, 24 points, third place.
Ryan says, pulling and straightening back and forth. I can feel the gentle rocking of the boat. Great lines and texture. I wish the white lines on the left were more in focus.
Sail Pulley by Dan Hennessy, 19 points.
Carl says this might be the best thought out and executed dog portrait I've ever seen. It's hard to imagine how it might be improved, except perhaps to darken the floor in front of the chair and maybe a bit of the chair as well. That might vignette the subject a bit more.
Say Cheese by Jackie Sayuski, 26 points, first place.
Francis says, you've made good use of the rule of thirds here, but I feel that you need the subject to fill the frame a little better. Maybe you were at full zoom, though, in which case you did the best that you could. The whole image seems a little devoid of life, too, but that is because you captured a sleeping seal. For me, wildlife photography is all about capturing a dynamic moment in time, one which is not so easy to see with the naked eye.
Sedentary Sea Lion by Bill Keaton, 21 points.
Ryan says, amazing capture. Each feather is realized in this image. The soft background shapes almost mimic the feathers, and the cool gray tone makes the bird just pop. Beautiful.
Snowy Egret 4 by Marge Brady, 25 points, second place.
Carl says, after a while, eyes and a face emerge from the icy clutter of frozen plants. Old Man Winter? But it takes a while. Might blurring or defocusing the outer clutter or vignetting have made this magical winter scene more apparent?
The Owl in the Ice by Beth Babbitts, 21 points. And that concludes our competition for the evening. Again, with our end of the year competition coming up. All that information is going to be sent out by email and on the homepage of our website. So thank you all for coming, and good evening.